Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider, brought to you, just for a change, by Vanishing Inc. My guest today, according to some research, but I didn't know the first fact, you may confirm momentarily, is a computer programmer, according to Geniepedia, writer and scriptwriter. He's an amateur magician who just happened to write one of the most important books in magic ever written with the help of 26 friends. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Pete McCabe. Pete, how are you this afternoon?
I am good. It is not quite. Oh, it is this afternoon now here in Southern California, where I live in Simi Valley. Beautiful day, getting a little hot, and I'm in my teacher job. I'm off for the summer, so I don't have to work today, so I'm available today. But teachers are always doing pretty well in summer.
Absolutely. So is it true about the computer programmer bit? Because I didn't know
My
that.
first professional job was computer programmer. I worked when I was at college. I graduated. I went to, how long do we have for this story? Because I've got a lot of questions. When I went to college, my first day, if you had asked me what I was going to be, I would have said, I don't know, maybe a lawyer. And then 4 years later, when I graduated, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I would have said, the only thing I know for sure is that I don't want to be a lawyer. So that was all I got out of 4 years. Well, not all I got, but that was far I got in that thing. So, but I went back at the end of my college career. So what classes did I really enjoy doing? Which classes did I do the best in? And computer programming, I took an intro to programming class. I got 100 on every homework. I got 100 on the midterm. I took an hour and a half midterm in 15 minutes. 3.5 hour final, I did it in a half an hour. I got 100. And I never went to class either because I would just go and sit on the computer and look at what the lesson was and just work on it. And I spent hours and hours. I would do all the homework for the class, and then I would spend another hour or two just playing around and having fun with it. And at some point I looked back and said, well, gosh, that's it's a good job. And B, I seem to have some talent at it and I seem to enjoy it. So that was what I pursued. So I said, let me see if I could get a job as a computer programmer. Actually, at one point I saw the movie Tron,
Hmm.
and Tron was the first real shot of computer graphics in the
Yeah.
movies. If you weren't alive back then, it's hard to imagine what that really was.
No, I
But I
remember how
thought
exciting it
computer
was.
graphics, because I had a strong desire to be graphic. I always took photographs. I can't really draw, but I always loved visual arts. So I thought computer graphics seems like a good combination of my interests. So I was able to get a job as a programmer trainee at ABC Television. And because their ratings system was written in APL. Now, I don't know if you know anything about programming languages, but if you
Little,
have,
but yeah.
so you've probably never heard of APL. You have to know a lot to have even heard of APL. It was a really weird language. It uses an odd keyboard. There are Greek letters that are whole operators. So if you put an iota character and then five, that generates a vector of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
And so a program is like a sort algorithm is 6 characters long. It's incredibly dense, and you can write programs super fast that do amazing stuff, very hard to debug, and it doesn't run super fast because it's an interpreted language. Anyway, that some of that part you can just edit that out. But ABC, I had programmed in APL. The class at Yale was taught in APL, so I knew APL. So they're like, "Oh, could you handle our rating system?" And I was like, "Yeah, probably." So I got hired, and I in the mornings I would train in COBOL, which
Hmm.
you might have heard
I
of, and then in the
definitely have heard it.
afternoons I would work in APL, and so that was my start. So then I was a programmer for 7 years. When Andy Godwin, when you read this, I'm still coming back to you with this website. I have a trick that I wrote a program to run it on my computer, and I want to have Andy program it into a website so that anybody can use it. But yeah, that was my first job as a programmer, and then I became a writer. I worked in advertising for 8 or 10 years. Then I worked in television, and then our show got canceled, and then I got on another show and I got fired from that. And then I couldn't get on another show, and at some point we had a child now, so I got a big teaching credential and became a teacher.
There you go.
What happened is I was
Uh,
tutoring a lot of kids. This is part, 5 more seconds. I was tutoring a lot of kids. My wife is a teacher, and she would have kids that need help, so I would tutor them. And I found that was much more rewarding than at the time my writing job was advertising, trying to sell diet products. And I just found that teaching kids was just much more rewarding. So that's what I did. And I have to admit, that's my one piece of life advice in general. Look at what you do, what you actually spend time doing. That's probably what you enjoy doing. Figure out how you can do that as much as you can. That's one of my goals.
yeah.
So, all right. So anyway, that's how all my careers before becoming and then a teacher, and yeah.
There you go. So what's your magic origin story? You've got 24 seconds.
I was at a Larry Nussbaum's house at his birthday party. He was 8 or 9, Magician came out with a glass full of sugar, which he could sprinkle out into the audience, put it down on the table, took this purple, I'm pretty sure it was purple, metal tube, placed it over it, snapped his fingers, lifted up. It was full of M&Ms. Still the greatest magic trick I've ever seen. I have never forgotten that. It's the first trick I ever really saw live in person, I think.
That is a good origin story.
That was it. And then I would do the coin roll in high school, in class.
And drop it frequently and get into trouble.
Oh, yeah. I've had some very accommodating teachers, I must admit, now that I look back on it. I've never had a kid in my class who practiced his coin roll. That would have been a fun thing.
Actually, would probably have encouraged it.
I would have, totally. I would have said, no, you're doing it wrong. Here, try this one. I actually do that because occasionally I'll see a kid doing the rubber pen trick, and a lot of them don't do it correctly. So let's take a moment for this podcast. Let's teach the proper technique if we have time.
This is great for the audio listeners.
What they do is wrong is the audio only version. I'll try to.
Peter's holding a pen.
I will explain. So I'm holding the pen, and it's important where you hold it. You want to hold it maybe between a third and a quarter of the way from the end. And now you can move the pen up and down by moving your fingers sideways. And that will rock the pen back and forth. But that's not what you want to do. That will not create the illusion. What you want to do is relax your fingers and then move your hand up and down so the pen is swinging freely somewhat of its own volition, and you're just limiting it. That looks much better. I think some of you on the screen can see that. This looks like you're just wiggling a pen back and forth. This looks like the pen is rubbery and it's bending. So anyway, that's what I would see a kid doing the pen. I'd like, no, you're doing it wrong. And then I would teach the whole class how to do the rubber pencil trick. So,
and there is nothing wrong with that. Pete McCabe, you are best known in our industry for Scripting Magic 1 and 2. How did these books come about? Sorry, I finished the question just as you were taking a sip of coffee. I timed it horribly. How did these books come about?
It's fascinating. There was an email forum, is the closest thing I can call it, called the EG. And it was started by a guy who worked for GE in upstate New York, and magicians would join. They would send their messages to him. He would collect them all into a digest, and every day you got today's EG. So it was almost like it started in the 90s. I just got a week ago the entire archive of everything, 4,000 issues. And I was on for a lot, and I wrote a lot. And a lot of what I wrote was, it's me learning to be a writer and working out all these thoughts and interacting with all these great names. Tommy Wonder's on it, and Max Maven was on it. So I just got it. I've been going back through everything I had. And I can see in my posts, I wrote a thing for Genie Magazine, script writing for magicians. And it was literally just how to format your scripts.
Okay.
What is a script?
So
how do you write an action line? Right. You're inside. What is how do you indent this? How do you write your action lines? What do you put? And then why you might want to do that? You want to think of everything from the audience's perspective. The script doesn't have any moves in it, unless the audience is going to see them. You only write down what the audience sees. And so I wrote a couple of things and put it up in Genie, and I had a lot of positive feedback. And one thing I noticed was that magicians. I'm not a real magician. I never have been. So because of these books, I get to hang out with a lot of real top magicians who seem to accept me, I don't know, as one of them, but within some circle that I'm very pleased to be inside of. But I'm always keen to be aware that I'm the outsider who's been let in as sort of a guest. But I wrote that, and then I wrote another one, a couple more articles in Genie that all ended up in Genie. One of them was, how do you do that? How do you answer that question? You could script that in advance. If you're probably going to get that question if you do magic, unless you really suck, you're probably going to get that question. You should have a couple of answers in advance, or you should at least know what the standard answers look like, because that was one of the. So I have a
question about that later.
A lot of the initial parts of and Scripting Magic 1 and 2, the two books are a little different, but Scripting Magic 1 was a lot of it was like, are you sure you want to do this? Like this way? Like this is stuff that a lot of magicians say. Maybe how do you do that? Very well, thank you. That's, as I wrote this up, if I'm writing a script for a movie, not magic, a movie, and there's a magician as a character in the movie, and I want to show that this magician is an asshole. Mm-hmm. All I would do is somebody walks up and says, how did you do that? Very well, thank you. And that's it. The audience would know.
Yep. Here's a quarter. Now it's gone. You're a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, can you keep a secret? Yes. So can I. Oh, I got you again. Aren't I? And that's all you'd have to do. Everybody who read the script would know this guy's an asshole. That's all you'd have to do. The only way I think I wrote, the only way you could really make him worse is to show him abusing his animals, which would be obviously worse. But that's it. And then a lot of magicians have these lists of lines of good responses to that line. And most of them, if you saw it in a movie, your immediate response would be that character's an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you should, and I wrote an article kind of trying to gently get this point across, and then suggesting some other alternatives. So I had a couple of like specific how you might handle this scripting issue. And then somebody in the EG wrote, Pete, you ought to write a book about scripting magic. And my response, the next issue was, actually, I'm working on it. So that was how it happened. It just slowly started to rise. Like, I can maybe write a book. For a while, my wife was teaching, but I was still working at the agency. So I would stay up late. She would go to sleep. So I went to a movie, and I'm in the theater of the movie, and I thought there should be a whole book of actual scripts. This is what scripting is like, and I should get people to contribute the scripts. I'm not going to write them myself. So I emailed David Riegel and John Lubbock, both of whom I knew. Hey, you guys want to write this book with me? And they both sent back, this is a great book. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. This is a great idea for a book. Go do it. Don't ask me anymore. But they both ended up contributing. And then I just started asking people, would they contribute scripts? And Eugene Berger first, well, John and David both agreed they would submit scripts. Eugene Berger, I asked him. He was like, absolutely. He agreed to be interviewed. I interviewed him and John. He submitted scripts. He was very supportive. Everybody I asked, that was where I knew that I was onto something. Because every magician that I like, I would ask, and they, do you script and do you have a script I could use in my book to help others? And the answer was always yes, I script. Everybody. Still met anybody who doesn't. And then, yeah, sure. Go ahead. There was only maybe 2 magicians out of the first 6. I asked 28 guys, and all but 2 of them said yes. So it was they knew how important it was. Still, there's books that talk about the importance of scripting, but still, Scripting Magic and Scripting Magic 2, as far as I know, the only books just on the subject of how to write a script.
Yeah.
In Magic, and that's, I mean, I hope they're helpful, but there should be more, I think.
They are unarguably.
Sound like I'm some.
No, they are unarguably helpful. It's a beautiful segue into the next question, which is
good.
How does it feel to be responsible for one of the most recommended books in Magic? If you look on Magic forums, on Reddit, on anywhere, on the blog posts that I do for Vanishing Ink, when people are asking about Magic books that are essential, Scripting Magic 1 and 2 is always recommended. How does that make you feel, man?
It makes me feel great. I'm going to say that I can talk about how good I think the books are. It's relatively little to do with me. I think what makes them great is the fact that somebody reads them and goes, wow, I love this magician. Oh my God, they script all their tricks. I had no idea. And then by the time you're at the end of the book, you're like, geez, every good magician scripts their tricks. I should get on the bandwagon. So that is I think the value of the book is far beyond my contribution. I hope I did a good job organizing it. But
that could be a little self-deprecating. I think you did a very
good job. That's the way I run.
It.
But I'll say this. At Magic Live, maybe 2 or 3 years after the books came out, I went and did Scripting Magic Workshop. 1,000 people in the big ballroom. Was great. And so I was there, and I brought books, and I signed. There was a little thing at somebody's thing where I was signing books for people. That's a great thrill. I know. Some guy came up to me, would you sign my book? I've never been asked for an autograph in my life. So that was a great thrill. So I'm signing the book, and the guy goes, oh, I said, where you're from? Australia. Oh, my God. Well, I'm really honored because even the first one, not a light book to carry it all the way from Australia just for me to sign it. I'm really honored. And the guy goes, oh, you're huge in Australia. And I'm still telling people about this story. I am huge in Australia. Apparently, there were only, at the time, maybe only 2 magic bookshops in Australia, 2 main ones, and they both, of the owners, recommended the book. So everybody in Australia is like, Pete McCabe is this thing. I'm huge in Australia. That's just hilarious to me. It is hilarious.
That's wonderful.
But I will also tell you this. When I was recording the Masterclass, I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of imposter syndrome. Yeah. I often have that in Magic because I'm not a professional magician. I never have been. I am a professional writer and organizer, and I analyze subjects, and I try to seek out the truth that's underneath a complicated subject and put it in a form you can read and understand and experience it. But I'm not a magician. And here I am writing all these books about how to tell magicians who are magicians what to do. And I'm not a magician. So I occasionally do feel a burst of imposter syndrome. And when I recorded the Masterclass a couple of weeks ago, that pegged the needle. I was just like, seriously, I'm like, oh, is anybody think I'm worth this? I don't know. But I do. I know Lisa Cousins, who used to work in the Castle Library, is like the
Yeah, I know
assistant librarian.
Lisa.
Yeah, you know this, right? She was probably there at the book signing. She wrote an article for, oh, I don't know if it was for the Magic Castle newsletter, and the headline was, she came to show me the headline, and she was working on the headline, and the first draft was how Pete McCabe saved Magic. I was like, you cannot put that as your headline. But and she was joking by put it there, but she was trying to write. She wanted to give me a lot of credit for, there's a lot more attention paid to scripting now
Yeah.
than there was when I wrote Scripting Magic 1. How much of that credit again, it's the 26 guys who contributed to the book, they are the
Yeah,
ones who
yeah,
spread the word.
yeah, but
But but anyway, all right. Was that enough answer for that question?
yeah, it's perfect.
Good.
What
The
do you
first
think?
one went on a lot longer. We're gonna go a little.
What do you think the biggest misconception people have about the word script is when it comes to magic?
The biggest misconception they have is that they need to recite the script word for word if they have one. And that is one of the things that just didn't really coalesce in my head until Scripting Magic 2. But I write all my scripts out and I don't ever try to recite them word for word at all. I mean, I write them out, and by the process of writing them out and working on them and editing them and whatever, they do drive in your head. I'm sure I say a fair number of the lines word for word. But I'm not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is make sure I have considered every moment in the script from the audience's perspective. Does it help get them to whatever mindset I want them to have for a laugh or a moment of, wonder or something serious or something meaningful, whatever I'm going to try to get them to. Is this line helping? Is it distracting? Is it in the way? Is everything I do? Then I get up and I just do this trick. I don't worry about, am I going to say the lines? The lines that are important will come to me and I'm going to deliver it. My performance is much more important than any recitation of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to deliver it in a way that is energetic and fun and do the best I can. I'm not going to try to recite the lines word for word. I don't have a lot of practice at that anyway. But I will say Brad Henderson performed at the Castle, do a great set. He's going along. It was very conversational, everybody thought. And something fell or somebody dropped a drink or something. He had to stop. So he had to go back like a sentence and a half. And he went back a sentence and a half, and it was the exact same words, and it was the exact same delivery, and it was fantastic. And just for a moment, you could see, oh, he's doing this as a recitation, just like, an actor doing Hamlet. But it was, and then for 1 second you could see it, and immediately it faded, and he's just so good at it that he could do that, and actors can do that. I don't really have that. I don't practice that at all. So I think that's the biggest
It's the power
misconception.
of Brad's beard. That's what
Well,
guides him
yes. I can't remember if this was what his beard state was during this performance. I've seen him several times. But that's the biggest misconception I think people have, is that they don't want to write a script because they don't think they're a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't recite it. And I don't recite my scripts, but I also think most magicians are much better actors than they give themselves credit for. They just don't practice correctly. If you can do the French drop, it's all acting. This is the actual technical skill required. Hold it. You see that?
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's the skill of the French drop. If you can't act like you're holding a coin in your hand, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's all acting. So if you've ever done the French drop, you've been acting. If you've ever done any sleight, you're acting like you're not doing a sleight. Roberto Joby can shuffle the cards, false shuffles, all sorts of moves, carrying on a conversation like he's just not even paying any attention. He's a really good actor. He doesn't have the range to play somebody who's very far into him and disappear into that part and, oh my God, I didn't even recognize you. That's only one part of acting. And in fact, honestly, that's probably a relatively small part of acting for most of the stars you see. They don't disappear completely into their parts. When the ones do that, it's amazing because it's so rare. Most of the time, you see Paul Rudd, Blake Voigt. He was working with Paul Rudd on one of the Amazon movies. Paul Rudd is the only actor in the world who only ever plays Paul Rudd. He is Paul Rudd. He just is that nice. He's that nice
He
guy.
does it really well.
Nice guy. He's so good at it. But he's the only actor he's ever seen, he says, is just not acting at all. He's just that. So that's what I think about scripting. You write a script this is the other thing. I'm working with the juniors program at the Magic Castle. Tomorrow I'm going to go down and we have our monthly meeting. So one of the persons came up and was doing a trick, the back-to-back book test,
Yeah.
which is a good setup. And so when you have an idea for presentation, the back-to-back book test or the invisible deck, what does it give you? What does it give you? How many moments can you create in the script? Can you have a line that will refer back to it and make the audience go, oh? Can it help to clarify the effect? Great. Can it give a laugh? Almost always great. For me, that's almost always great. Will it change people's perspective or prepare them for something or make them look at something in a different way? How many of those do you get from that presentational idea? That, I believe, is how you evaluate a presentational idea. Is this a good idea or not? I don't know. What do we get from it? Make a list. Yeah. Okay, now we can evaluate it. And so that's the process of going through the script. For me, what can I put here? Is there anything I can do with this moment?
Okay.
And maybe there isn't. And then you go through. And again, I'm not reciting it all. I want to have as many of those things as possible in the trick.
You talk in Scripting Magic too about the pre-scripting process, which is essentially what you've touched on then, and it starts with an idea you wish to communicate. So
yes.
For people that are struggling, how do you come up with that initial idea?
Well, first of all, let me say that it doesn't always have to be an idea, because that does seem very highfalutin and scaring to people. It can be an emotional response.
Okay.
Which is a lot easier, I think, I can make that happen, right? I can give people an emotional response. Often there's a moment of realization that can be incredibly powerful. This is my favorite current trick to do is the cut and restored rope, the first trick I ever learned. And standard method, cut it, and then it's tied in the middle. And I have if I restore the rope, then it's a miracle. But at the end, it's just a rope. There's no evidence that there was a miracle. I want to leave you with permanent evidence of the miracle. So I'm going to move this cut from the middle down to near one of the ends. And if I can do that and leave you with two different length pieces of rope, well, that's permanent evidence of the miracle. This is a El Duco idea that I got out of an old linking ring from 1973. But you just slide the knot down to the bottom and untie it, and what do you know? A short piece and a long piece. I love this idea. It's so brilliant. And I was doing that for a while. And I thought that was great. And then at some point I thought, I'm going to move it. And I'm going to try to move it down near the end. And so I would grab it and pull like I was trying to move it, but it didn't move at all. And then I would let my hand off and I'd look and it didn't move. So I grab it again and I would pull. And this time I would pull it a half an inch, maybe. And maybe even some of it slipping out of my hand. And when I pull down, it's slightly there, but you can't tell. And I look at it, maybe, but I can't tell. And I grab and I pull it a little bit further. And now I'm like, it's an inch down, and I hold it out to somebody in the front row. Is it getting lower? I can't, and I keep pulling. And my goal is somebody in the front row is going to realize that it's moving. I'm not going to tell them. At some point, they're going to look and go, wait, is that moving? This is the path I want them to go on. I want them to first go, no, it can't move. That's ridiculous. He's just pulling it down out of his hand. Right. Then I'll nullify that and whatever. And then I want them to go, wait, is that happening? And then I want them to go, oh my God. And at that moment is when I'm going to try to grab it and then just slide it all the way down to the end. And if I can get the timing right on that, people almost, you can almost hear them. But the goal is it's going to happen from the front of the audience back.
Yeah.
I want the wave of realization to sweep over the cast because they'll hear somebody next to them see it, and then that's part of them seeing it. And that's the whole, if I can take the audience on that trip, then when it's off and I untie it and permanent evidence of the miracle and cheering, it's great. And it's the same exact trick. And you have to go so slowly. This is another fantastic lesson that you just can't go too slowly. I mean, I've taken 2 full minutes to move it all the way down. And I mean, again, part of it's because I'm not in a professional environment, right?
Sure.
In the classroom, I can take as long as I want. But you could hear a pin drop in a bunch of, 47th graders are all listening quietly. There must be something to it. So that's scripting. You don't have to recite anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to even say anything, but you have scripted out in advance how you're going to take the audience on that trip.
Yeah.
That, I think, is great. Now, if you want to have an idea in your script, then there's a couple of ways. First of all, start with simple ideas. Don't be afraid to take a simple idea. Um, but mostly think of one way to sort of reverse engineer it is to take a look at the tricks that you really like doing and then see, does there any, if you were going to make a, fairly obvious metaphor out of this trick, what would it be? And you don't always want to pick the obvious ones because they're obvious. But if you look at those, you can maybe start get a sense of what is important to you. What do you think is important? I think family is the most important thing. So if I'm looking for an idea, family is first thing I'm going to think of. What's important to me? And then another thing I always look at is what common, what's the word, like expressions that I disagree with.
Okay.
Chris Rock had this bit about everybody says life is short. He says that's not true. Life is long, especially if you make a big mistake. And I think that is absolutely true. In fact, I have a trick that is basically that as its underlying idea that life is not short. Life is long, and you need to live it accordingly. Right? If you think life is super short, you might take all sorts of crazy risks that if you are planning for the long term, you wouldn't take. If you think life is super short, you might eat unhealthy food and that you would regret later if you thought life was long. Mostly, if you want to try to achieve something and you think life is short, it's hard to really commit yourself to achieving a long-term project because life's too short. But if you know life is long, I want to be better at whatever, start working on it. Start now. Work on it a little bit. Work on it a little bit your whole life. You can't believe how good you'll be in 5 years. So those are the things.
I like the idea of taking those things that people think as a standard, like life is short. And I remember years ago seeing a stand-up, doing a bit going, everyone says the world's really small. And he used to like going up to strangers and go, the world's massive. I've never met you before. And it's the same kind of idea of flipping that.
I mean, so the world is small. That, that's an emotional statement. That is, I feel it myself sometimes too. But people say it so often that it's easy to forget the world is actually vast. It is enormously huge. And so, especially when you and I can be having this conversation.
Of course.
Across half of it.
Yeah.
Just casually. So it's easy to forget.
Yeah. In the first book, you write about developing your character and how you can do that. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's super important about developing your character.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
it's me, but turned up to 11.
Yeah. Honestly, you're developing your character is what you do when you're not performing magic. It's who you are. Your character is who you are, what you do, what you think is important, how you behave. If you want to change your character, that's what you have to change. If you're only interested in magic, but it's not interesting enough, then maybe you need to study other things. You need to broaden yourself. If have a temper, maybe you want to work on your temper and not have a temper and try to not have that. That's your character, all of those things. So working on your character it can be a 24-hour-a-day job to not for your performing character, your actual inner personal character. That is what is more important even than your performing character. And if you have a good one of those, you don't so much need a performing character, especially if you're an amateur like me or something like that. If you're a professional, it's more, you might want to have one. But not everybody. Ben Seidman, I met him in person. I've seen him perform. He seems like the sort of the Paul Rudd of magic, maybe. It's Ben Seidman up there on stage.
Yeah. He's
just a little more excited because he's up on stage, but it's not anybody different. Then you see John Lovick, and he's a completely different person on stage and off stage. So I think, but the way you develop your character is by looking at, again, you write your script out, and then you look at every line, and can I make that line more specific to my character? Every moment. When I have a card signed, a card selected. Long time ago, I thought, how do I have a card selected? And so I wrote down, pick a card, any card, let's shuffle the back of the deck. And the way I have a card selected, I try to get away from all of those, as many of those things as I can. Any card. Oh, pick a card, any card. Don't let me see it. We'll shuffle it back in the deck. Those were the three things. So I'm not spreading my cards out face down. That seems like if you were in a shoe store and there was just boxes, which one do you want? You'd be like, can I look at it? No. You got to pick now. So just by considering the pick a card process from the perspective of a customer, it made no sense. So at least I have a line, which I sometimes mention the shoe box line, and people laugh. So I spread the cards face up. So you're going to pick a card, and we all will see it. I actually do almost no tricks where I'm going to guess your card.
Yeah.
if I'm going to do Triumph, your card. We all know what the card is. Let's all
Yeah,
watch
it
the trick
doesn't matter.
together.
Not
Yeah,
important. Yeah.
I find I can understand that some presentations that's not true. For me, I have never found that to be a hindrance. And then nobody has to remember it. You don't have to remember. I don't have to worry about every freaking card. We all know your card. It's just a more friendly environment. This just seemed more friendly to me. And now I'm not going to shuffle it back in the deck. If I shuffle it back in the deck, you don't know where it is. I want you to know where it is. It's right in the middle here, right above this, where you selected it. We'll just close the deck up and leave it like that. So I'm going to do a spread call, but there's no shuffling or other further anything of the deck. This is Jerry Anders's idea. He want the spectator. If you put the card in the middle, the spectator knows exactly where the card is. Once you shuffle, they don't know. So the magic is a little bit softer then.
Sure. Sure.
Anyway, I forgot what question you asked, so that's.
So did I. Shall I ask another one?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay.
Maybe the same one again, and see if you get a totally
often-
different answer. That might be just the same question over and over again.
In your work in advertising, you mention about how an ad is only able to have one message.
Yep. One
Can you
message,
talk about the one thing and how it applies to magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your show. If your trick can get, if you want your trick to get across a message or have an idea, you can get across one message or one idea. A lot of people don't want their tricks to have a message or an idea. Generally, I find that kind of magic is not my thing anymore, especially. But I used to love tricks that were just meaningless. And so the remind me the question again. I've already gotten myself distracted.
About the one thing
The
and
one
how
thing,
that applies
right?
to magic.
Right. So your trick can have one idea. When we would make an ad, we were like, okay, what do we want this ad to communicate? And then they'd be like, well, they'd give us a list of 5 things, and we'd say, okay, which of these is if you could only pick one, what would it be? And then we would eventually get them to pick one, and we're like, oh, that's the one we'll make the ad for. And it's advertising. I've taught me a lot about targeting your message. You would have an ad, and the target market is this big. Let's say you're reaching for this little square of it. So you have an ad that focuses in like a laser on that thing. But that ad will kind of not really appeal to some people on the other side of the target market. They're not your target market, but most companies are like, I'm not going to turn away any potential customer at all. So this strong concept would be weakened to make it more palatable to other people who aren't really you're going to buy your product anyway. And then you end up with a weak ad for your target market that does nothing, but it's stronger for people who won't buy your product. What
Right.
benefit do you get from that?
Yeah,
So you want to have, I think, your message. If you have an idea of a message, is it right for these audience or is it right for you? Right? Does it represent you? This goes back a little bit to character, but that's if you pick tricks that you like and tell the audience why you like them. By the way, this is something I never have seen a magician do, but you love your tricks that you do. I hope Gene Berger would do this sponge balls and he didn't like it, but he said I couldn't find a better trick, so I had to keep doing it. But he did tricks that he loved mostly, I think. And then that was that one. He would say, I do the sponge balls because I can't stop getting people just love it so fucking much I can't stop. But that was he did tricks that he liked. And if you do the tricks that you like, you want the audience to like them.
Yeah.
A lot of times what the magician likes about a trick is you can't communicate to the audience some thing of the method or whatever. And so I think that's, you gotta, maybe that's a useful thing to help you. Maybe those aren't tricks for the audience. Maybe those are tricks you do for other magicians.
Yeah.
If you're going out and doing a trick for the audience and the only thing that's really great about it is the method, they don't get that. What do they get out of that? So
Yeah. Find a different trick.
It's so hard to get a method that you just think is so great. And you're just desperately trying to figure out a way to make it into a thing. But Guy Hollingworth did a lecture at the Magic Con a bunch of years ago. And he 4 different versions of the same packet trick. And he showed the original version and how it worked, and then he tried to improve it. And so he made this change, and he replaced a gimmick card or whatever and changed this move. And this was better. And then he did a 3rd one, and that was better. And then he did a 4th one. That was the final one. That was the best of all. And then he said, now, is that good enough? And the answer was no. This is the best version of the trick that I made. It took a year and a half or whatever working on it. Is it good enough? No. Okay. Put it in the drawer and do the tricks that are good enough. And I mean, I've worked on tricks that I don't get them to a usable phase. It's somewhat disappointing, but I usually find that I learned something from the experience. But that was his thing. So if you want to have yourself tell the audience what you love about a trick, try to help them to love it too. I think that's one of your main goals as a magician should be to get your audience to love the tricks you do, right? Doesn't that seem
Absolutely.
like you're one of your goals? So
Absolutely.
tell them what you love.
Yeah.
See if you can get them to love it. What I love about this trick is that nothing happens until it actually touches. And now they're going to be paying attention to that. And so
Right.
now you can misdirect attention from whatever you need to misdirect attention away from and just get them to focus on the best possible moment of the trick. And wow, I mean, that seems like a positive thing.
Absolutely.
So that, and plus you're putting more of yourself in it. The real benefit of that is, let me tell you what I love about this trick is I'm going to help you to try to love it. But really what's happening is I'm expressing to you who I am and what I love.
Yeah.
That's what the audience wants.
Yeah.
But here's my opinion. I've said this to all the kids in the juniors program at least once. Put more of you in the tricks. That's what the audience wants. They don't care about the tricks as much as they care about you. They want you. They want to know who you are. Give them what they want. And it's a lot of magicians, especially, amateurs and up and coming, the juniors, some of them are more a little shy.
Sure.
It's whatever. But that's what the audience wants. They want to know who you are. They want to know what you care about. It used to be people would perform in a sort of inoffensive, calculatedly inoffensive way so as not to piss off any of their audiences. But then they ended up not revealing anything about themselves.
Yeah.
Or what they ended up revealing about themselves was that they're actually not that interesting. So
Yeah. Here's my playing card vest.
everything you do reveals something to the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything you do and everything you don't do.
Let's touch
If
on.
you have a chance to make a line, sometimes it'll happen. Somebody spectator will say something, and you have a chance now to make a response, which is going to be either slightly sexually inappropriate or slightly demeaning to the spectator, and you don't necessarily want to do that. And you'll see some performers will say it anyway. Some performers will stop and say, I guess I shouldn't say that now, just to give the audience maybe a chance to catch up to it. And some of them will just smile and move on. And all of those choices are revealing something about you. Everything you do reveals something about who you are. So you might as well take the lead. Might as well write it out in advance in your script, and then you don't have to worry about rescind, but it's in there.
Yeah. 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 That leads on to this really. But let's talk about jokes in scripts. Where do you find people go wrong most
Okay.
commonly?
Terrific. I can tell you John Cleese's answer. I love answering these questions with somebody else's answer because, again, I'm the imposter, right? But I can tell you what John Cleese says, and I hope his authority. So he's talking about you're either writing a script and you have a point in the script where you need a joke, and it's the last joke, and then you'll be done. And so you don't have a good joke, but you have a joke. It's not that good, but you'll be done. And so if you put that joke in, you're done. And then you don't have that, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I need to finish this. I need to finish this. I need to finish this. And what he says is the key to success, to creativity, is being willing to be uncomfortable long enough to come up with something that is good. And so that's where people go wrong. They settle for a line that they've heard, that they think, that line will go good here. That's probably in an overall sense, the biggest mistake people make is they don't understand that what makes a joke funny is the character who says it. Usually, at least half of it is that. Bill Malone will deliver a line and get a big laugh, and then somebody else will deliver that same line and not get a laugh. And it's not because they're not that funny. Even if they're funnier than Bill Malone, they're not Bill Malone.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be as funny a line. And it's some lines you can do that and get away with and have some.
But they can say it exactly the same way Bill Malone says it,
And
beat for beat, every nuance, and it dies because they're not Bill Malone.
Even if it doesn't die, it'll get a small laugh.
Yeah, okay.
And then they're like, well, it got a laugh, so they'll keep doing it. But the good is the enemy of the best. They don't. The jokes are funnier if they're personal to you. They're funnier. There are. I gave a whole lecture on comedy at Magi Fest. And I only ever know of two theories of comedy, and one of them was Isaac Asimov. And he said, comedy comes from a sudden change of perspective. So you have to establish the perspective, and then there's a line that changes it, or you suddenly learn that something you've been describing can be interpreted in two ways, and then this new perspective is the joke. And that's great. But I think you don't need to have a change of perspective. I think the audience can just have a realization, and that is funny enough. So Rowan Atkinson does a bit where he's a guy in a movie theater, totally silent, walks in, he has to struggle to get past people and apologize to this and that, and then he sits in his chair, he's got his popcorn and his drink, and he grabs the popcorn, he shovels a whole bunch of it in his mouth, and everybody laughs because he's so hungry. And then at one point, he's just watching the show, nothing's happening, and he starts, and people are like, What's he doing? And then gradually, and he's getting, because there's a popcorn kernel caught in his teeth. Just the realization that that's what he's doing, it's a laugh.
Yeah.
It's no joke. It's not funny.
Yeah.
It's just funny to watch. There's a huge difference between lines that are funny on paper and lines that are funny when someone says them out loud. Tom Burgoon had a bit. He borrowed a quarter from some chick. This is in the palace at the castle. He borrows a quarter from something. He walks over to the side of the stage while he's chatting. The stagehand hands out a like a champagne bucket, metal champagne bucket. He drops the quarter in, makes a nice sound, sucker, or something like that, as he walks back to the top of the stage. We can get, everyone every night, and a small laugh. Then he goes to he says, we've been doing this all week, and he says to the stagehand, how are we doing? And the stagehand shakes the thing, and you can hear some coins rattle around in it. That didn't make you laugh to hear me say that. But I saw him do it live 3 times, and it was a big laugh every time. And the first time I was like, really? And then the second time, yep. And the third time, that is funny when you do it. It's not funny to read it in a script. It's not funny to have somebody say it out loud to you, telling you about it. I tell the story relatively frequently. Nobody ever laughs when I tell the story. But everybody in the audience laughed, every one of them. And that's a huge lesson. That was the number one thing I learned working on the staff of Sports Night, is we would get the scripts, and then there would be a table read before, the
Sure.
first day of the week. Read the script, and then everybody can have questions or costumes or whatever. That's the first thing. And I would read through the script and make a tick anywhere I thought would be a laugh, and then I would read along at the table read, and there were the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them. There were lots of moments that would get a laugh that that would surprise me. And by the end of 22 episodes, nothing surprised me. This is going to get a laugh. It's not funny to read on the page, but this is going to get a laugh when he says it. Nothing would surprise me, but it was much less often that I'd be surprised, because I had a sense of this would be funny just to see somebody do it.
To see somebody, or to see that character?
Indeed. Yes. To see that character do that line. That was funny for that character to have that moment, to have the audience see that. Yeah. And there was there's a show called Taxi, which was on.
Yeah, I remember Taxi.
And Carol Kane, when she auditioned to play this Latka's wife, she went in to the thing and was like, I don't know how to make these lines funny. And James Brooks said, don't. We made them funny or not. You just say them like they're true. And she would deliver his lines like they were true, and they'd be hilarious. But it wasn't because she was saying them in a funny way. A lot of people think to make a line funny, you have to do something funny or goofy, and that can work. Jim Carrey does that. He made a pretty good career out of that. Although he doesn't do it so much anymore, I've noticed. He seems to have grown past that a little bit. But I think that's part of it. That's where comedy, so changes of perspective are where comedy come from, or the realization of something that they didn't realize before that can produce a laugh. And just seeing people do things. There's lots of things that are funny when people do them that are not funny to read on the stage. And if you can learn to see that, if you can learn to see, that'll be funny when I do that. That's great. It's a lot of magicians. I was doing a show with my best friend from middle school. I was visiting his family, and he still has all his old props. We put on a show. I get to do stratospheres. It was great. But he had a Buddha temple thing, and we were going to do a production. And then he had this bunch of stuff, and I'm like, okay, here's what's going to happen. One of the things you're going to pull out is a light bulb, and then you're going to walk over and screw it into some thing. And while you're doing that, I'm going to walk up and load another whole bunch of load into the production chamber while nobody's looking. And I mean, just off the top of my head, I knew it was going to work, just because I've done enough shows to know that when you produce this thing and start walking over to screw it into the actual, oh my God, people are going to be like, wow, that was missing the whole time. That's totally going to swamp attention. And I'm just going to walk up and load, and then we can go back and produce another bunch of stuff. Yeah. So we produced 2 temple screens full of material just from that moment, which I knew would work. I knew that would work. Not always do I have that experience, but I knew if I did this, everyone will put attention there, it'll work. The same thing happens sometimes with comedy. I'll do this and it'll be funny.
Yeah.
And you just kind of learn that, but you have to try it to learn it and paying attention to it.
Of course.
And it helps if you when it works, then you can look and go, oh, this is probably working because of that, and understand it. And then if it doesn't work, you can tweak it or make it a little stronger or change it or do whatever. But the basic principle of just understanding that can be. Yeah. You can write something that will make people laugh, and it's not funny to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that takes that, but that definitely, that was one of the longer things it took me to learn, I would say.
If you were to condense everything in these two fine
Volumes.
tomes
Yes.
into one most important piece of advice about scripting magic, what would it be?
Well, Vernon, spend hours practicing or whatever, practice your slights to perfection, then spend hours on what to say. But in reality, I think more useful advice is spend, look at every moment of every trick you do and see if you can put yourself into it more.
There we go. There
That's
we go.
that's if there's just one thing you can do. The second thing, even before you get that, if you just want to go through your scripts and look at them from the audience's perspective, that's usually what most people say is the biggest single benefit they get from scripting. It's You can get it first. So if you've had that benefit already and you want to move on to something more advanced, I think put yourself in every single moment that you can, or try at least to put something of yourself in every moment that you can, because that's what people want to see.
Now, regardless of your self-imposed imposter syndrome or
Yes, yes, go
otherwise,
ahead.
you
I will,
are
if you want, I will act like I think I'm confident.
you will be teaching our masterclass series soon.
Oh,
What
that's right.
can people expect?
Oh, all right. So the first three sessions, if you've never done a masterclass, there's three of them. The first one is basically the scripting magic workshop that I teach at conventions or magic clubs or whatever for the last 15 years. Series of exercises starting from nothing and work your way up to when you are ready, I would think, to do your first script. So we look at individual pieces and common things magicians say, and how would you say them to be more distinctive or make them more you? That's where one of the exercises is, how did you do that, for example?
Right.
And I have in most usually I talk and then there's a minute to write your answers down and then they share. So we didn't really have the sharing, but I did have Josh J and Andy Gladwin and a couple of other people, Francis Minotti, who did it in advance and sent me some of their stuff. So I share some of their work. Then that goes on for, I don't know, an hour or so. And then the first one ended up being a bit long. I don't know how long it will edit it down to, but it's a bit long. Then I teach a couple of tricks or technique things that involve scripting because you spend an hour and a half on a workshop. You want to
Yeah,
learn a magic
people
trick.
like
You can't,
tricks.
people want to learn a trick, and that's I do too. So why not? So there's a couple of little moment that you can use in a triumph routine and a thing, and then a couple of tricks that demonstrate some of the benefits of scripting, I hope. And then I wanted to try to make the Q&A for the third one to be not just all the standard questions that I've already heard. So I've already heard them all. So I picked the first 5 of the top 10 and I answered them in class 1. So they're all answered in there. Well, that's class 1. Class 2 is everything advanced. So you theoretically start with a script, even if it's just you record yourself and then transcribe it, or have otter.ai transcribe it, or upload the video to YouTube, and then YouTube will generate a transcription for you, which you can then download. So it's a little bit more of a work. But you have a script, and then we talk about things that you can go through the entire script and look at this element. Go through the script looking at this perspective of it. Usually they're not that long. It's maybe a 3-minute trick or 3-page
Sure.
script or something like that. And then all the more advanced talk I have on structure, and David Ben's The Tragic Rhythm. It's not specifically his, something he lectured about. And all the more advanced stuff once you've gotten to the point where you got a basic first script and you want to go past that.
Okay.
Everything that I have, every advanced exercise I have, most of which have never really been taught because the standard workshop is an hour or whatever. Most people, that's about all they can do.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
number 2. And then there's a couple more tricks. And then the other last 5 most frequently asked questions, the FAQ. And then third will be, I think, different than all the other ones.
Okay.
You?
No, yeah, go on, carry on.
Oh, okay. Third will be, first I'm going to start with anything I missed. I have to watch the things and see anything I left off. But mostly the first thing I want to do is all the exercises that people did in 1 and some of the exercises in 2, I want them to share. So try to
Right.
get people to share in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll hunt people, lots of people, because that's invaluable way to learn any creative activity, is to watch what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And you look and you're like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible.
Right.
And so now maybe you don't do that, but that unlocks for you something now that that's possible. That unlocks for you. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
get lots of them shared in the chat, and you can see what other people have. I think that would be really cool if we can make that happen.
Well, what we could
And
do actually is for the live Q&A that we can post on the VI Monthly Facebook group. And I think some people will be scared to share their work, but there
oh
may
yeah,
be some brave souls
sure,
that would be
sure.
prepared to upload or share what they've done, and then in
And
the
then
live Q&A we could maybe have a look at some of that and
yes,
discuss it.
exactly. Or possibly collect the chat log and just email it to everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's another thing I was
We
thinking of.
can
So if
work
we can
out a
make one
way
of
to
those
make that
work, I
work.
think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the Q&A, I think, should not be, I mean, people can ask any questions they want, obviously, but I think instead of, what is the most important thing about, mentalism or whatever, give me I'm doing this trick, and this is my sort of character, and I need a good way to introduce it, or a
Uh-huh.
line, or a structure, or whatever,
So
and a
specific.
specific question. Then I can give them a specific answer that is either
Wonderful.
helpful to direct answer the problem, or give them, a
Make
new
them
way to
think.
think
Yeah,
about it, or another perspective. And that's what I'd like to see. I think that would be more useful. That I love doing
absolutely.
that too. That's
Yeah,
all I
yeah,
do. I go
yeah.
to the juniors meeting and somebody come up, with some idea of trick, and I just, well, what if you did this and that or the other thing? And so I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. I think that
Yeah.
would be more useful than sort of generic questions. If people have
Yeah,
general questions,
absolutely. Well,
sure, I can
let's
tell you the number one most important thing about mentalism. By the way, it's the audience has to be absolutely certain that that's not a stooge. That's
there
pretty
we
much
go.
it.
Well, I will be hosting the Q&A, so
Oh, fantastic!
I can hopefully steer the people to get as specific as we can. Now, what type of performer or what level of experience would you say the masterclass is aimed at?
Ooh, gosh, I don't know. My masterclass is aimed at everybody who has had any thought of making their magic better by using scripting. Whether you're a beginning magician and you figure you want to start at the beginning, whether you've been doing magic for a long time but you've never really paid that much attention to scripting, um, that's where class one will start. Um, Here's an interesting point. So the exercises in class one are more beginner level, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
fundamental. But that doesn't mean that if you're advanced, you don't do those again, right? Push-ups are a pretty simple exercise, but when you're getting in shape, no matter how much in shape, you're still doing your push-ups.
Yeah.
When I interviewed Derek Hughes, he had just come from an improv class because it's like working out, right? He uses those skills in his act, so he trains to keep them trained. Um, I think that is. Gone off the track there.
No,
Too
no,
many
no, 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 no,
examples
no, no, no.
myself.
It's like
I
the
forgot
more
the point.
advanced
I'm
people
circled
can get
down.
something out of the beginner
Yes,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
The more advanced you are, the more you get out of those beginner level exercises.
Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
sure true. So if you're and when I do them, when I was up at Magi Fest, there were people in the audience who are professional performers who have done all this stuff. But they wrote the whole thing out. I emailed Francis Minotti. He to give me some of the samples for the stuff that I could share in the master classes, the pre-recorded ones. And he did every exercise. 10 of them I sent just because they're useful, and
Yeah.
sent me back all of his thoughts and his whatever and his responses on all of them. And they were all the most fundamental beginner level exercises. But he still did them. And as he wrote it, the thing, I'm glad I did this because I got something out of a couple of these things.
There we
So
go.
there's no exercise that you can't learn anything from, I don't think. But it is designed that if you're uh, to take you from, and that's one of the nice things about it being a video. You can watch half of one and then let it sit and
Mm-hmm.
come back to it in a month or 2 months or
Yep.
3 months after
Yep.
you're ready to move on to the
These
next step.
aren't watch it and then they're gone. They're added to your
Yeah.
account. You can download them and keep them forever. Come back to it in a year. Come back to it in 5 years. When you
Yeah, that's
feel
the
you're.
biggest advantage of it versus live. Live is you get the chance to share your work and there's more
Sure.
community, whatever. But having it where you can pause the video anytime and come back to it and
Mm-hmm.
refer to back to whatever, that is really great.
But then
So,
in the final week, we get the advantage of the
we
live
get
with
both.
me hosting the Q&A with
That's great.
everybody and you.
October something, right? Tentatively?
Yes, it's first
Were you
weekend
supposed to
in
say that?
October.
First weekend in October? That is not what I had on my
First
calendar.
Sunday in October, I
Okay, let me
believe.
check.
I don't know. That's what I think. I just do the marketing, Pete.
I have. What the heck?
I don't know. I don't even know what you're looking at.
I'm looking at my calendar and I don't have
Okay.
it. So I need to get it on my calendar.
Oh no, the
Oh,
first week. Yeah. The live Q&A will be the third Sunday in October
I
at
know I put this on my
9
list.
p.m. GMT, which I think will be 1 p.m. for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so I'm putting it down here, 1 p.m. And it's going to go for like 10 hours, right?
Yeah, about that.
Because with everybody giving real secret questions, it can take a bit longer.
It can take a bit longer, and I
But
love
that's
the
not
fact
perfect.
that you're up for it.
Oh,
Pete,
yeah.
we are so over time.
Yeah. Oh,
But
well.
we always end the show with 4 quickfire questions. Are you
All right.
ready?
I'm ready.
Favourite pizza topping?
Pepperoni and pineapple, sorry.
You don't need to say sorry. Be
I
proud of
know,
your
but I
beliefs.
do anyway.
Favourite movie?
Oh, just Memento was my most recent favorite movie. Before that, it was Brazil. But since Memento, maybe Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I love that movie.
Okay. Favourite person or people who make music?
Ooh, Elvis Costello.
And finally, who would you rather fight? One massive Andy or 100 tiny Joshuas?
What's the nature of the fight? Sorry to call you down. Like
I think,
weapons or like in a
but you can
bare knuckle?
interpret it how you wish. There can be weapons. It could be bare knuckle.
And it's 100 tiny
Hundred
Andys? Or
tiny
tiny
Joshuas,
Joshes. How
one
tiny?
massive Andy.
Obviously, I don't mean to be difficult. I know I'm
Six
supposed to
inches.
respond to
Six
this quickly.
inches.
6 inches?
Mm-hmm.
I'll
But
go
there's
with the 100
100.
tiny Joshes,
Okay.
just because that would be and if I want to fight Andy, I could just go up to him and shove him, and at least I'd have some experience of fighting. But Josh, there's only one way I could ever get the experience of fighting a tiny 6-inch Josh J is by this one. So that's what I would have to choose. I give my students an assignment where um, they get to pick characters, and then they have certain traits, and some of the traits would help you in a fight, and some of them are like down would help, and they have to combine them, and then they write an article about the fight and what happened. It's a creative writing activity, and so one of them is that you could clone yourself, but every clone is only half the size, and so that they get barely smaller. So that's one of the featured things. And an army of tiny little things is one of the other ones. You could summon an army of whatever, but it was only little ones. So that's the Joshua Jays. Whoever picks a real Andy?
Oh, well, you see, I change it. Sometimes it's a massive Josh and 100 tiny Andys.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But
And in that case, I would pick 100 tiny Andys again, just for the experience.
Hector Chadwick, aka Stephen Long, picked the giant Andy because he imagined, and this is no
Giant
disrespect,
Andy.
Giant Andy. He imagined him
yeah.
to be a bit slow and dim-witted. I'm gonna come and fight you. And he thought
Yes,
he thought
I see
that might be
When you
quite. He
said,
could just
I
run away.
I have to admit, I assumed you were talking about life-size Andy versus 1,000, not
No,
giant.
giant.
Okay, I may have to rethink this completely.
Oh, for
now,
heaven's
because
sake, Pete! This is meant to be quick fire.
I know, but sometimes we do multiple drafts. All right, I'll go with 1,000 tiny Joshes, but no, I mean I used to play soccer, so no 1,000 tiny any 6-inch tall anything is going to beat me. I'm just going to kick them all over the place.
Pete McCabe, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I hugely appreciate it, and I'm
it's been great
massively
fun.
looking forward to seeing your masterclass starting on the first weekend of October.
Thank you very much for getting me involved in this and being a great host. I had a great time, and so I hope that some of that came through.
Thank you very much, Pete. Take care.
You're welcome.